Jerry Abbey, head of marketing here at Copia. Before Copia, I'd been at Rockwell and Plex Systems, so working in the industrial space for a while. And with me here today is my good friend, Sebastián Trolli of Frost & Sullivan. Seb, would you mind giving a quick intro on your background?
Yes, of course. And thank you very much, Jerry and the Copia team for having me today. And thanks to the audience for being here with us today. Really quick, my name is Sebastián Trolli, based out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm currently a research manager and the head of the Industrial Automation and Software program at Frost & Sullivan. So looking forward to this exciting conversation around industrial DevOps.
Me too. And part of why we have all these conversations, just for background for the audience, is I've been doing market research reports for most of my career. The last couple of years, I did the State of Smart Manufacturing report at Rockwell, and lately I've done the State of Industrial DevOps reports. We have the first annual, which was launched last year, and we have this workforce one that we're going to be talking a bit about today. And just to plug it, because I got the data back and Seb and I were talking through it yesterday, the second annual State of Industrial DevOps report will be coming out in about a month and a half, and has a ton of great data on where industrial DevOps is heading and general market data around downtime, what's triggering downtime, how much downtime costs. So some really interesting stats there. And I may plug a couple of them in today's conversation. But today, where we're starting is in the past. We are thinking about the weight of the past and what hinders people moving forward. So my first question, I'm going to toss it over to you, Seb, is how do legacy technologies and the challenge of interoperability, which is such a challenge for so many people, hinder the manufacturing workforce and overall productivity?
Sure, that's a good question to start, Jerry. Well, you know that manufacturers or manufacturing environments are built around OT systems that were designed in most cases decades ago, right, with fundamentally different priorities that today's IT systems. As you know, OT prioritizes reliability, availability, safety above anything else, and use proprietary protocols and hardware with life cycles, I would say, between 15, 20, 30 years compared to IT's 3 to 5 year refresh cycles, right? So completely different worlds there. And these systems also were intentionally designed and isolated for this security and stability, right? Not designed for network connectivity or data integration to the business systems, right? The IT domain, right? Also, this legacy equipment frequently runs outdated operating systems. In some cases, at least here in Latin America, I had the chance to see Windows 98 machines still running. And those systems, you know, are really insecure, cannot be patched, use serial communications. And there is another problem that all industrial control systems and PLCs as well use programming languages that are not understood, you know, by the IT domain. So I would say that those are from a technology standpoint, right, the main features or characteristics that you know, hinder or interoperability, right, or make difficult interoperability between IT and OT teams, which at the end of the day has a negative impact on the manufacturing workforce and the overall productivity of an industrial firm, right?
Totally. And I love that you pointed out a version of 1998 Windows still running. And I imagine like the impact on anyone that would be brought in as a recruit to work there, seeing that, being maybe shocked, maybe uncomfortable that that level of technology is there, and maybe fearful of what they were going to gain in terms of skills for the future. They're not, if it was me, I would not feel that I was prepping myself for the future and would be worried about my career entering that type of facility. And I like that you mentioned that IT, OT touch points and convergence that's happening. And while there's been all these legacy systems in place, the workforce and different departments are trying to move forward, but it's not always done in the optimal way. And I think that leads us into our next question as we're thinking about the spread of devices that may or may not be isolated. Like we had the Purdue model in place. Many organizations have the Purdue model in place today. But in terms of that real segmentation existing, there are these shadow OT devices that open doors. So our next question that we're going to dig into is the rising tide of threats. Why is the manufacturing sector increasingly targeted by cyber attacks? And what vulnerabilities make it such an attractive target?
Yeah, this is another massive topic, Jerry. Thanks for giving me the chance to talk about it. And I would summarize this with a statement which is smart or connected factories equals heightened risks, right? For 3 years in a row, manufacturing has been the primary target for cyber attacks. And that has a very powerful reason behind, which is the low tolerance for downtime, right? Which increases likelihood of ransom payment, right? Sorry. So again, as I was telling you, 3 consecutive years in a row, manufacturing has been the most targeted industry in the US and one of the top industries worldwide, right? So downtime is critical. Downtime means millions of dollars per day, right? So, and one technical or one technological feature that is making this, I would say, more vulnerable is the fact that with the increasing IT-OT convergence, right, this is dramatically expanding what we call the attack surface, right? Remember, in the past, you have isolated OT networks. Now those networks are connected with IT systems. So the attack surface, as I said, is expanding, right? So I would say that that's the primary reason why manufacturers are being, hit with such short frequency, right? Sorry, so with such high frequency. So this is a massive concern among industrial firms, manufacturers, and the C-suite, of course. CISOs have these cyber threats top of mind every single day. So it's hard. It's hard to face it, and it requires immediate solution, right? Quick response times.
Totally. And that leads into a couple of the stats you and I were talking about yesterday from this 2025 industrial DevOps data that's going to feed the report. So 2 key points is downtime. The cost of downtime per hour went up in this year's report. Last year it was 4.2 million per hour. This year it's roughly 4.7 million per hour. Also, in thinking about that, the pressure that it brings along, we saw a slight increase in the percentage of ad hoc fixes. 80% of the respondents said that they believe ad hoc fixes on the plant floor, hot fixes, are commonplace. Trying to just get back up and running, keep things moving. And I think that I bring that up because I think it plays deeply into how these organizations become vulnerable, because it might not be the best in class approach when you're just trying to avoid that downtime. So leading into our next question and thinking more critically about this, silos can be a problem by maybe that hotfix being introduced and not sharing it with other teams that need to help with remedying it. And my question for you here, Seb, is what is the critical need for harmonization between IT, OT, and CISO teams in today's industrial landscape?
Thanks, Jerry, for that. And if I may, I would like to add just 3 quick metrics that even amplify what you were saying about the risk of manufacturers being targeted by cyber threats, right? And go quick to the next question. First of all, 2024, 65% of manufacturers fell victim to ransomware attacks, right? And this means rise of 56% compared to 2023. Second statistic, in 2024, data breaches cost industrial organizations 13% more than the global average of almost $4.9 million. And third, but last but not least, manufacturing shutdowns from ransomware last an average of 30 hours, which means a total cost of $126 million per incident. So I think that those metrics or those statistics also help understand and help bring awareness of the dramatic consequences that a cyber attack can cause in the in manufacturing firms, right? Sorry for that. Now going back to your question, which I think that that traditionally or historically IT and OT teams always operated in separated worlds, right? IT taking care of business or enterprise systems, and OT taking care of shop floor systems, right? Thing is, what we are seeing today is that with this IT OT convergence trend that is happening from a few years ago, those worlds are merging, are converging, and there is a figure inside the organizations that is gaining a lot of importance, which is Chief Information Security Officers. So one of the main responsibilities, typically CISOs were, I would say, their typical domain was the IT world, right? But since IT-OT convergence, CISOs are starting also to have lots of responsibilities on the OT side, right? So one of the things that I would say will help to harmonize, right, between OT, IT, and CISO teams is that they work together with a unified approach. You can think this as a triangle, right? With the CISO figure right up in the triangle, and then OT and IT as his foundations, right? So that's the way I see how the critical need to harmonize, IT, OT worlds with the prominent figure of CISO in the center of all this trend, right?
Yeah, 100% driving that harmonization and getting the CISO more involved with those teams. It just opens the doors, unlocks those silos. And you and I had discussed one of our case studies with a company called Targan. Phenomenal progressive group. Their IT, OT, and CISO meet on a weekly basis, sometimes more, making sure that they're understanding the risks, the vulnerabilities, and just keeping that collaboration for harmonization across their systems. It's really a best-in-class approach and something we're going to see more and more. It was highlighted in a recent HBR article that I read, talking about a new architecture for organizations in our current age. And I'm actually publishing a white paper on this later this week. If anybody's interested in that, it'll be on our website. Two other points that I was just thinking about. So I was at a conference earlier this week and talking to people across the board. So IT, OT, and talking about some of the things within the OT space. And it was interesting to hear how plugged in many of the IT experts were about file backups, industrial code management, having a source control, version control management for these, and really looking to have the IT type tool set in the OT space, again, to drive that harmonization and really help the whole organization move forward. And going back to the first part of our conversation, giving a facelift and updating from those legacy systems into modern systems and doing it in a way where you keep the operation secure.
Absolutely, and let me add this, Jerry. With you just mentioned some of the main features of an industrial DevOps solution or an industrial DevOps platform, right? But today, with this inception or the CISO's figure gaining and more prominence in the industrial world, in the traditional OT world, we need to start thinking of not just an industrial DevOps approach, which of course Copia pioneers, but also start to think of DevSecOps, right?
Mhm.
You know, we need to consider security operations since the very beginning of the lifecycle process of software development, automated testing. Security should be embraced since the very beginning, right? Since the very first moment.
Yeah, that's secure by design approach built
Absolutely.
into everything we're doing.
Absolutely.
Cool. And you just led us into the next question perfectly. So industrial DevOps as the unifier, how can industrial DevOps address these challenges through technology, process improvement, change management, which is the number one problem we looked at yesterday from the data that just came back. The number one issue with adoption and people moving forward with the solution, and then also documentation and just general enhanced visibility. How does industrial DevOps help with these things?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, just to clarify, a quick recap on what is industrial DevOps from a research standpoint, right? Which is a kind of strategy of bringing modern software development principles to the industrial world, right? Applied to cyber physical systems, right? So where automation, PLCs are, the most important pieces of equipment, right? So it's important to highlight also that industrial DevOps platform provides not just the technological backbone for this unification, right? That you are mentioning as the unifier, but also it brings the people and the process elements here, right? Improve processes, as you said, change management, documentation tracking, right? And that is possible through key features. You mentioned some of them, but version controlling systems for industrial automation, code, automated testing frameworks for control systems, CI/CD pipelines, comprehensive monitoring across both IT and OT systems, right? And all tailored, of course, to PLC code and automation assets, right? And all these capabilities that are embraced or that are provided by an industrial DevOps solution, I would say that every change is logged, right? Teams can easily, collaborate on code via reviews, and this provides nothing but benefits, right? Both IT and OT stakeholders can see the full history of automation, code changes. It reduces miscommunications, it reduces surprises, right? And I would summarize this in a single phrase, which is an industrial DevOps platform acting as a unifier, right? Creates, I would say, a single source of truth for all the industrial software process, and of course, apply to PLCs and other industrial control systems devices, right? And I would like to add that a traditional implementation or a typical implementation follows 4 different steps, right? Visibility, which is documented existing systems and establishing baseline, then go through a standardization process with implementation of consistent processes and tools. I would say then automation, which is creating repeatable deployment and testing procedures. And last but not least, optimization, right? Which means continuous improvement, basically based on metrics, right? Smart metrics. So I would say with that characteristics, industrial DevOps is acting as the unifier, I would say, of the process improvement, change management, documentation, and of course, enhanced monitoring and visibility.
I love that. It's nice, simple 4 steps to think about. And when I hear you talk through those, I think about de-risking failure when you have visibility, standardization, automation, optimization, especially with the features of having automated backups of all your files and being disaster ready. We talk a lot about disaster recovery, and I've heard a lot of talk about disaster preparedness, but I think as much as we talk about that in the industry, it's hard for people to really accept like a disaster is going to happen. It's just about when, where, and how severe. But if you have an industrial DevOps platform in place, it gives you that level of control to revert back to the previous working version of the files. It allows you to understand the version control and to be able to collaborate across teams. If something happens in one plant, because it's centralized and going back to that single source of truth, it's able to be transferred to another plant to avoid a similar problem. It's really a standardization tool that has been needed maybe for decades at this point.
Absolutely, and you have an interesting success story or customer case with Varland, right? They established, rigorous, really rigorous code reviews and accountability for every change, right? And that led to fewer production issues, fewer downtime incidents, of course, improved team communication and collaboration as well. So that is a really good case study to showcase and to highlight the importance of the industrial DevOps as the unifier and the risk reduction technology that is today in the industry, right?
Thank you for pointing that out. So I think we have some of the best customers in the world, and it is just phenomenal to hear those customer examples validating what the product can do for them, and just generally like what industrial DevOps brings to the industry as it becomes more and more well known and accepted. And moving into those things that are becoming more known, more talked about. Our next question focuses on AI's practical place, moving away from buzzwords and thinking in a practical sense. Where does artificial intelligence fit into the industrial automation landscape in a clear, understandable, practical sense?
Well, thanks. This question is everywhere, right? I had the opportunity last month. I had the opportunity to attend Hannover Messe in Germany. There were about 4,000 exhibitors there, and I would say that 90% of them were talking about AI, right? Some sort of solution in terms of generative AI, agentic AI. So AI is everywhere, and which is the negative consequence of this? As AI is everywhere, you should be able to clearly identify which is a true AI solution, which are the true AI use cases that provide value and return of investment, right? ROI on a fast, right? And with that, I can say that tangible AI use cases that are really proven, that are really well implemented out there in the industry. We can mention them: predictive maintenance. We can mention AI-driven quality control. We can mention also real-time monitoring and analytics, right? Those use cases are the most spread around the manufacturing and the industrial community, and they have proven value, right? Real actual value in the production processes, right? So, predictive maintenance, again, AI-driven quality control, real monitoring and analytics, and also in terms of helping the engineer teams, not just in the operational side, but also on the engineer side, AI-driven coding, right? AI-driven coding or AI-driven AI-driven tasks to assist engineers that code, whether it is PLCs or any other industrial devices. Those are really proven use cases that are being implemented very widely in the industry today.
Thanks, Ed. And taking that one step further, I've just been thinking about the conversations from my conference earlier this week. People not being able to discern where AI really has value, and to bring it back to what we're talking about here and thinking about workforce. Those things, to your last couple points about where does it enhance your workforce? Because in a practical sense, the most useful application of AI is to enhance what people are already doing and to take it from, and I'm borrowing some of what I'm about to say from the CEO of Fiverr, who posted this week that everyone's job is going to go away. But in this context, the things that are hard are now easy for someone that is using AI. The things that were near impossible are now moderately difficult. And the things that were thought wholly impossible are now hard. And that is the person that is leveraging AI and the company that is leveraging AI in a practical sense for their work, their output, and the outcomes that they want to drive. And they may not be getting driven in the same way anymore. They definitely are different, but I think beyond everything we're talking about, it's a new sense of understanding in how we apply AI to our work.
Absolutely, and we need to understand that 100% agree, Jerry, and we need to understand that industrial AI is here not to replace workers, but to make their life easier, right? To augment their capabilities. Always the human must be in the loop, right? And you talked about use cases where empowers the workforce way more than the technical ones or the operational related ones, which I mentioned, like predictive maintenance, etc. AI is being used today, again, to assist in code generation, to accelerate onboarding, right, in skills and training management, to capture expert knowledge that is retiring from the industry, right? That's a huge problem that today manufacturing is facing, right? How we keep, the tribal institutional knowledge that is leaving due to the aging workforce. Okay, AI, AI embedded in industrial solutions is helping to capture that knowledge, to train the new generation workforce, and to, in a certain way, to motivate them to start, being involved in manufacturing activities. So the role of AI is beyond technology itself. It's about probably bringing, showing especially the millennials, Gen Z, the new generation of workers, hey, yeah, manufacturing probably can be seen as a traditional, legacy, manufacturing environment, but today we are applying the latest cutting edge technologies that will help you perform even better. So I think that's the really powerful meaning of AI, way beyond a technology feature.
Yeah, 100%. And that type of working environment makes everyone that much more motivated. It makes it easier to recruit new people. I also think about it so much as a unifier, like a cross-generational unifier, because for the case of industrial DevOps specifically, and introducing an AI that can help with writing code, understanding code, summarizing code, documenting, which nobody wants to do, documenting the code. When you think about somebody just coming into the workforce, they might have a lot of questions and they might be put with a much more senior person, OT controls engineer, that is just trying to get the work done. And if this younger engineer has a tool like that where they can ask questions, it allows them to understand the meaningful questions that they can take to that more senior individual and have a discussion that's on a much deeper level. And there's value being driven there, both for the younger and older generation, to have a discussion that is unified, that digs into something more meaningful and helps lead them to develop that culture of exchange by leveraging new technology that supports everything they're trying to get done. And I can say that every single customer I've talked to, many very experienced ones that have used the documentation tool that we have, just absolute relief and thankfulness to not have to write pages and pages of documentation or explain why no one wrote pages and pages of documentation, because they were working on keeping operations running, avoiding uptime, and just didn't have time for it.
And you know what? 100% agree, Jerry. And one thing that I'd like to mention is that, when you see a customer embracing, for instance, an industrial DevOps solution, right? It is sending a signal out there that that organization, that firm is investing in state-of-the-art, cutting edge, the latest technologies, right? And it's, really worried about, fostering a culture of innovation. And this is extremely important, extremely appealing to top talent to bring them on the plant floor, right? So yeah, today AI is here to stay, and it's here to make our lives or the life of the manufacturers easier, right? And more appealing, right, to the newer generations. That's how I would summarize the role of AI today as a unifier, as you said, in the industry.
Yeah, and I love the optimistic outlook, and I know you and I both had that optimistic outlook. But it's true when used and applied in the right way. And this leads into the next question, thinking about future-proofing the organization. Why is it critical for manufacturing companies to adopt industrial DevOps now, in that sense of future-proofing your organizations and empowering your teams with the best tools available?
Well, I thought we went through this question in some way in previous ones, but I would like to say that, today, why embracing industrial DevOps is extremely important today, because every single day manufacturing, the manufacturing environment is getting even more complex. And today, agility and innovation are, I would say, the new competitive currency, right? And with the framework, not just the technology per se, right? But also with the framework that industrial DevOps operations, right? Version control, automatic testing framework, CI/CD pipelines, automatic backup, right? Or disaster recovery. All these technical, but also from a framework standpoint, methodology features, all what all these do is, bring innovation and agility to an organization, right? From technology, but also from a process development perspective. We also said that embracing an industrial DevOps platform is, sending a message out there, right? Hey, we are investing in new technology, so that attracts newer generations, right, to the shop floor, to the manufacturing floor. So I would say that, and as you said, it also brings a new layer of security into your systems, right? Today, cybersecurity, as we were discussing on the ransomware, on the manufacturing cyber attacks question, today cybersecurity is paramount, right? So embracing an industrial DevOps technology, but also framework, increases the security of your operations as well. So there are a lot of avenues. There are a lot of many different avenues where embracing an industrial DevOps solution and embracing an industrial DevOps methodology will improve your productivity, your uptime, right? Your workforce development, your workforce engagement, and at the end of the day, of course, your profitability.
Yeah, 100%. And some of the things that I was thinking about listening to you talk through that is, and thinking about the future, is if you're adopting an industrial DevOps platform, you're likely adopting into a company that is very future vision forward to meet the needs both now and today. And the way that I've always looked at customer, vendor, supplier type relationships, it's establishing the right relationships at the right time with a long-term strategic vision. Who is this organization both now and in the future, and how are they going to support me? And I see this will be a future topic, so I will just mention it quickly. The AI factory of the future, people beginning to talk about that more and more, and how do you structure your organization to be AI ready? And lots of conversations about software-defined manufacturing. Another thing, if you're adopting an industrial DevOps platform today, you're setting that foundation for what's coming and what you need to be prepared for, both now and future. And one more thing, not to ramble too far, but I think you had some bullet points in here that I wanted to touch on. and maybe hit on before we close. And also, anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, we're going to be moving into Q&A in a few minutes, so please start plugging them in. NIS2 in Europe, the SEC 8K rule, and other regulations that are coming in. If you have a version control management system, industrial DevOps, if you have automated backups, centralized repositories, these are things that feed into those regulations so that you can provide visibility and adhere to and meet all of the guidelines that are existing today or coming down the line.
Yeah, and also I would like to mention, Jerry, that we are talking about future-proofing your organization. If you think of a future-proofed organization, one of the immediate responses would be Amazon, right? And I would love to highlight the successful use case or case study, sorry, customer success story you have with Amazon, right? You have there a cutting-edge company, state-of-the-art company, truly innovative company embracing industrial DevOps solutions to bring down the downtime of their PLCs, right, by 80%, I guess. I guess it was the metric, but I would like to hear capture the concept of, okay, we have a future-proof organization, which is Amazon, one of the largest technology companies in the world, also embracing industrial DevOps solutions. So I think that's a practical, a true, an actual example of how industrial DevOps can help a cutting-edge organization improve their operations, right?
100%. I love that you pulled in that tangible example to back up what I was rambling on about. Thank you, Seb.
You're welcome.
All right, so we've touched on all the questions that we had prepared. Before I turn into Q&A, did you have any other comments to tie it up, Sebastián?
No, I'd like to probably finish or summarize what we were talking about with just 3 or 4 points as a kind of summary of the discussion, probably highlighting some key points. First of all, manufacturers today face a convergence of challenges and opportunities, right? You have decades of old legacy systems and fragmented processes on one side. Then at the same time, there is this rising tide of cybersecurity threats that are being increasingly, increasingly expand the attack surface, right, for cyber threats. Then, of course, the silo teams, right? Operational technology on one hand, IT, right? Information technology on the other side, security operations on the other side, right? So with the industrial DevOps approach, acting as a unifier, not just from a technology standpoint, but also from a framework standpoint, and the importance of the CISO figure in the organization, right? Embracing not just IT domain, but also OT domain under his scope, right? Again, think like this like a triangle, and the more integral DevSecOps approach. That is where that is the key foundation for overcoming, right? To overcome those challenges that I recently summarized, right? So embracing industrial DevOps means basically being on top of the latest technology innovations. It will guarantee you, proper version coding, proper, automated backups, proper centralized management. So it should be a no-brainer for C-suite and for operational engineering leaders to embrace this technology and frameworks to safeguard their operations, right?
Couldn't have said it any better. Thank you, Seb.
No, thank you
we
so
did get
much.
a question come in. I'm going to I'll read it out, then I'm going to speak to some of that data we looked at yesterday. And then because you've been researching so much in the field, I'll pass it over to you. The question is, the benefits were nicely explained, but what are you seeing as the biggest obstacle for traditional OT teams to adopt industrial DevOps? Ideally, an answer outside of traditional change resistance. Are there cost concerns, or maybe they don't think it is easy enough to use? So from the research that I got back yesterday, I already mentioned change management was number 1, and that's the first time I've seen that. But then right behind that, it was competing priorities, which is always a problem with any investment in this space. And a lack of motivation was one of the ones up there, a lack of acknowledgement that they need an industrial DevOps platform. Cost concerns ranked up pretty highly there. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Seb. I'll pull up that data while you respond.
No, yeah, absolutely. I would say, yeah, change management, of course, manufacturing, industrial automation are landscapes, are sectors which are traditionally very conservative, very reluctant to change. But I would say that in today's highly competitive world, right, budget, right? Budget, which ties to competing priorities, right? Yeah, and there is here a fact that is, bringing together IT and OT. That's not always easy. So, traditional different worlds. So having a champion inside an organization, right? Or let's call it digital transformation champion, let's call it IT OT convergence champion, would be critical to address that challenge. But definitely, yes, as you said, Jerry, lack of budget, priorities, competing priorities, and of course, the apparently, unmatched between IT and OT domains would be challenges to overcome that goes beyond change management, right?
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with everything you said more.
Way more cultural, and thanks, Jacob, for the question. I would say that it's way more cultural rather than or people related than technological, right?
And I just about have the actual data up. I think we hit every single one of the reasons why. And I'm excited to actually bring this data out into the public, which we'll do in about a month and a half. But it's always nice to preview a couple of things. So here is the list in order: change management, resistance, competing priorities, lack of budget to fund an initiative, lack of need to manage code more effectively. So not acknowledging that it's even needed, which we saw in last year's survey, and we saw to a lesser degree in the responses that I found this year. I think it's being acknowledged more. Next on the list, a lack of skills, and followed by a lack of interest from management. And at 21%, which was the lowest response here, we haven't found a technology that can do it.
Oh, whoa, that's surprising. Well, I'm glad to hear that the budget is there. So I was pretty sure that budget was one of the main concerns. And well, here Jacob says probably it's maybe they don't think it is easy enough to use, right? In my previous life, I was a controls engineer at an industrial software conglomerate, industrial automation conglomerate, and believe me, having the opportunity, to have an industrial DevOps platform in terms of documentation management, in terms of centralized management, in terms of versioning control would have been, amazing. So I don't think that from a control engineering, from a programming engineering perspective, they will find it really extremely, not just helpful, but also extremely easy to use.
Thanks. All right. Any last questions? We've approached time, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if our audience has them. So I'll give it another minute. And while we give it that minute, I think we can start saying thanks. So thanks to you, Seb, for joining me. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And if you're interested in the recording, we'll be putting this up on YouTube so you can refer back to it after the event. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you to the copy organization as well for having me today, and thank you to the audience, right, for listening to us, to this exciting discussion, and I hope you can get the most out of it. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Seb. Thank you, everyone.